Poschin b'chvod Achsania. I first want to thank Mrs. Metzger, who comes to Toronto, who introduced me to Mrs. Feldman. And now I can thank Mrs. Feldman for graciously hosting this event for CyberSem. I hope this evening's presentation will make CyberSem more of a reality in the world of chinuch habanais, women's education. In following the Alter Rebbe's instruction to live with the times, I would like to start with a Dvar Torah from last week's Parsha. Why last week's Parsha? Because we know that the bracha from Shabbos interjects a bracha into the following week. And so since we're only 3 days past last Shabbos, I think it's okay, we're living with the times. Last Parsha's Emor starts with the words, Emor el ha-kohanim va'amarta aleihem. We see the word Amar said twice. Rashi comments on the fact that the pasuk uses the same word twice, and he says, Lahazhir hagdolim al haktanim. This for us is the mitzvah of chinuch, that elders are instructed to teach the youngers, Lahazhir hagdolim, to educate the young people. Parshas Emor is always read during Sfiras HaOmer, when every day is a mitzvah. The whole month of Iyar is filled with a mitzvah, the mitzvah of Sfiras HaOmer that we count daily. The Rebbe makes a connection between, in the inyan of chinuch, between Parshas Emor, Sfiras HaOmer, and the month of Iyar. The days between Pesach and Shavuos are days of chinuch. As we progress to Matan Torah, we know that Pesach was the time of the Leda, the birth of Bnei Yisrael. Shavuos is the chasana, is the wedding between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Bnei Yisrael. And the days between are days of preparation. They are days of chinuch. Already from the beginning of time, from the beginning of Avram Avinu's life, we know that he provided us with the yesod of the inyan of chinuch. As it says, Ki yadativ leman asher yitzava es banav ve'es beisoi acharav. Avram Avinu instructed his family to teach Emunas Hashem to their children from generation to generation. So what is the inyan of chinuch that it's being added, that we're learning something new from in Parshas Emor? And why is it being said in relationship to the Kohanim? It says, these are the pasuk, V'amarta el ha-kohanim, this is, the instruction of chinuch is being given to them. Why them? There's such a small portion of Bnei Yisrael who are Kohanim, so why would such an essential, such a fundamental concept be said to a group of people who are really a small in number in relationship to all of Klal Yisrael? And so we learned something new about the inyan of chinuch from last week's parsha, and that is that the chinuch that's discussed from last week's parsha is the inyan of lifnim mishuras hadin. How do we see this? In two ways. First of all, the words that Rashi chooses to use to tell us about the inyan of chinuch, he says it's lahazhir hagdolim al haktanim. That is, lahazhir comes from the term of Zohar, which means to be bright and sparkling. The concept of Sfiras HaOmer also portrays that same idea. Sfira comes from the lashon of sapir, which is a brilliant stone. The kind of chinuch, lifnei mishuras hadin, is supposed to be a sparkling chinuch. We are being instructed through this, in this week's parsha, to raise our children in a way that they should be sparkling lights, that their chinuch should be brilliant in their eyes, and they should be examples, living examples with chayas of the chinuch that they've received. So how does this connected with the Kohanim, who through them this parsha is being taught? So the answer is that the Kohanim, they are close to Hashem because of the karbanos they do. What's the job of the Kohanim? Their job is to elevate Bnei Yisrael. They are the appropriate people to infuse Bnei Yisrael with this concept of uplifting, with bringing sparkle and beauty and brilliance to their children, that they should be the ones who continue the Masorah after them. And so, this is an appropriate example for dugma, for preparing us for Mashiach Tzidkenu. And so this I use as an introduction, appropriate to our times, for CyberSem. Because this is a dogma of what my vision and goals for CyberSem are. How did CyberSem come about? When I was taking my master's, I saw that you could do almost anything online, except a girl could not go to seminary online. And I decided that I was about to change that. I didn't have any clue as to how much work there was going to be involved in this, but I'm so far in, I hope that everybody can benefit from it. So then, once I saw that I was going to do this, I enrolled in a doctorate program in distance education. So I would be technically responsible for running the program. And so also, and I did it also so that women the young ladies who would be taking my courses would be able to use the credits for my courses towards a degree in a degree-granting college. And when I go to speak to the deans, they actually are interested in speaking to me. They're very willing to speak to me because of that education I got. It's come in good. When I chose the topic for my dissertation, I focused on self-regulated learning as transitioning from a traditional classroom to a distance education, and I found that particularly appropriate. I looked at the obstacles that a student would find when they're moving from a classroom that's basically being taught in a frontal fashion to having to work in a more independent way. And I understood and I learned tremendously how important self-regulation skills are. Some examples of them are time management, materials management, having realistic expectations, having a positive self-image, and many other similar soft skills. Until now, I have been referring to students as being new high school graduates. The beauty of this program is that, and one of my key objectives, is that I should provide online learning that is easy to navigate and accessible to women from 20 to 120. If you would have asked me 6 months ago to make a projection of where I'll be in 3 to 5 years, I would have been able to answer you. But in the past 3 months, we have introduced some new online tools that has accelerated what was supposed to be available in 3 years, that will be available not in 6 months, but to the new semester in September in Yirtz Hashem. I simply need to move my visions along much faster. An example of this is that I have in production now, and it is being recorded almost as we speak. It's being done in Eretz Yisrael, and it's nighttime there, but it is being recorded now, is a Hilchos Shabbos course. And this Hilchos Shabbos course is going to be Hilchos Shabbos in the kitchen. It's going to be Hilchos Shabbos and Yontif in the kitchen. And I always dreamed of producing a Hilchos Shabbos course whereby you could see demonstrating the halachas as what they mean and how it's supposed to be done. It's wonderful to hear a shir where the person is reading from a sefer, but to have the actual demonstration of how to apply it on the screen beside you, that is something that I dreamed of. And when I made my video that you'll see in a few minutes, I became in contact with someone who actually does this motion graphics, and my Hilchos Shabbos course is being produced like that. In addition, another dream that I had was to have the courses available in languages. In English obviously, but French, Spanish, Russian, and Hebrew in addition to that. And when the Hilchos Shabbos course will be produced, it will be produced in Yirtz Hashem in those languages, which is really a 3-year into the future vision being brought up to the next 3-4 months. CyberSem has 2 kinds of courses. I have accredited courses, or courses that can be used for accreditation, and self-paced courses. And the self-paced courses is one area where I've also moved up the availability of them in the last little bit because of this connection with the motion graphics. So the accredited courses, they cost $350 each, and I'm working with universities and colleges to allow the credits that they receive through CyberSem to be used as transfer credits towards degree-granting colleges. These courses, the accredited courses, are 12 weeks, whereby a student completes a module of the week, and they're going to complete the complete course in 12 weeks. Within these courses, you have opportunity to interact with the instructor, interact student to student. A person is not alone looking at a computer by themselves. There is no loneliness in a distance education community. In addition, the students can arrange to collaborate on assignments, and they can even be in the same classroom, as you'll see on the video in a few minutes, at the same time as their instructor. The cost of the self-paced courses is based on the length of the course. The courses that are self-paced, there is no tests, there are no papers, but there will be a check for understanding that will enhance, that will expand your knowledge. The courses that are going up on the self-paced area are, for married women, the calendar of Taras Mishpacha, which is also being done with graphics. I made a commitment to produce something for CyberSem I started as being college students, but it ended up being whatever you always wanted to know about Taras Mishpacha was created, it was filmed by Sarah Carmeli, and it's 6 units of her lectures. And so people who come with misconceptions about Taras Mishpacha, I wanted to dispel those, and so we created this course. The last course that's in production now is a course on the machzor as a preparation for the Yom Tovim. And my hope is that women who will be in Mirz Hashem in the bungalow colonies will be able to have little groups that are preparing for Yontif and learning about the machzor. In either case, you do not have to take a minimum of courses at any time. You can take them at whatever time works for you, a semester here, a semester there, it doesn't matter. The current courses are Chumash, Navi, Historia, Writing and Speaking to be Heard, Rashi Sichos, and my halachas of Shabbos and Yontif in the kitchen. Courses that are in production are Koheles, Rambam, and ECE program for U.S. accreditation. I hope to make a course that is accredited by the U.S. government so that our ladies can upgrade, our young women can upgrade themselves and will be able to be, you have to be accredited when you're an ECE, an early childhood education instructor. You need to be able to have a master's, and I hope to offer that so that our students will be able to be paid well and will be able to work in government-approved places. I was going to review the business format for CyberSem, which I will do happily on a private basis. If anybody wants to contact me about it, I will be happy to explain it. So as each one of us strives as parents, as adults, as educators, whatever role we are in with young people, and we strive to give them a sparkling chinuch, a chayes dika chinuch, better today than yesterday, to infuse the chinuch of the young people, which is with as much chayes and lebendigkeit that we can. We hope that this will raise the bar for our families, our communities, and ourselves.
Such an honor and privilege to be here. So nice that we have a program that's about women, for women, run by women, by a current friend from Toronto. So there was this man who had a store, and his store was very successful. And one day, next door to him, on the right-hand side, this big, huge store opens up. And this store says, "We will not be undersold." And Yankel, the little store owner, gets very nervous. A few weeks later, he has more problems, because on his left-hand side, another superstore opens up. And this one says, "Lowest prices guaranteed." So at this point, Yankel was getting very nervous. What's going to be with his little store? So Yankel goes to his friend Beryl, and he says, "Beryl, what should I do? I have a store on my right, a store on my left. We will not be undersold. Lowest prices guaranteed. What am I supposed to do?" And his friend says to him, "Yankel, don't worry. Everything's going to be fine. The solution is very, very simple. All you have to do is put up a sign on top of your store." What should his sign say? Right on top of the door of his store, it should say simply, "Main entrance." There are times when we think in our lives that on the left-hand side we have this problem, on the right-hand side we have this problem. From all sides, it seems like it's very difficult. And all we need to do sometimes is go into the main entrance. The main entrance that we have is Torah. We have our traditions, we have what we have been taught, and the solutions can be very, very simple in terms of what we need to do. I was teaching a group of young women. And as I was teaching them, I said to them, I want you to raise your hand if you love yourself. And it was very interesting to see their reactions. You know, some of the hands kind of slowly inched up. Others were like uncertain. Eventually, all of them reluctantly finally got to raise their hand. I then said to them, okay, now I want you to tell me if you don't like something about yourself. If you have an ugly fault or something that you really want to change about yourself. And at this point, all the hands shot right up. Instantly, immediately. So we could analyze this and say that this is something that really has a message about our self-image, especially the self-image of women and girls in our society. But I think there's more to it. I think there's a general message here. You see, every day when we wake up in the morning, we are confronted with struggles, with challenges. And the question is, how do we confront these challenges? We're confronted with challenges in terms of how we view ourselves, how we view our self-image, what we think about ourselves. We're confronted with challenges, outside challenges in the world in terms of how are we going to keep what we hold so dear to us, what we value, and how do we keep strong with it? And we're confronted, of course, with challenges about how to find time and space that can really value what we hold dear, that can really find the serenity that we want, these niches of time that seem so difficult to find. But the solution to all our struggles, to any of these struggles, is really feeling a deep and solid core of who we are and what we are. This Thursday is Lag BaOmer. Actually, tomorrow night starts Lag BaOmer. And, of course, this is the time when we celebrate Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, who is the author of the Zohar, who founded the whole book of mysticism as we know it, the inner dimension of Torah. And the custom, of course, on Lag BaOmer is that we go out into the parks, little children go out into the parks, and we play with bows and arrows. The simple reason why we play with bows and arrows is because in the time period of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, there was no rainbows in the sky, which is Hashem's covenant, Hashem's promise to us that he won't destroy the world. And in this chus of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, there was no rainbows. In other words, we didn't need that because his chus stood in our stead. But on a deeper level, what this bow and arrow is really signifying is this inner aspect of Torah that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai taught us. When they first invented weapons, you needed to shoot a weapon to someone close by. Your enemies were close by. Your struggles were close by. But as time progressed, they realized they needed to shoot the bow and to shoot the weapon to something further. Sometimes that possibly something that you didn't even see or you couldn't even identify. But the trick with the bow and arrow was something that they had to learn. And that is that in order to shoot your enemy from far away, you first had to draw the bow close to yourself, close to your heart. And the closer you drew it to your heart, this dangerous bow, the further it could go. And the lesson, of course, is we wake up and we need to face these challenges, these demons, these insecurities, these foes, these worries that we all confront in our daily life. These worries that these girls confronted and how they looked at themselves and how they looked at the world around them. But in order to confront these issues that we all have, these struggles and these challenges, we first need to draw to ourselves. We first need to know who we are, what we represent. And the only way to know who and what we are is by studying, by learning, by understanding where we come from, by understanding who we are, what our strong inner core is. There's a quote in Mishlei that says, Chosek shifto soneh beno, which really is translated often as spare the rod, save the child. In other words, if you're going to be sparing the rod, if you're going to be stopping to discipline your child, you're going to hate your child because he's not going to develop the way that you want him to develop. What does this mean nowadays? Conceptually, the shevet means, the rod means something that's hard, that's unyielding, that's strong. And the idea is that we need to be unyielding in terms of knowing our values. We need to be strong in terms of our inner core, in terms of knowing who we are, what we are. Not yielding, not wishy-washy, not bending in every direction. If we love our child and if we love ourselves, we need to have that strength of character, that strength of personality, that strength of values, that strength of the inner core. We all know the violinist Yitzhak Perlman, famous violinist, one of the most incredible violinists. He was once playing in Vienna. And after a beautiful concert that he played, one of his fans was able to come over to him and actually speak to him. And the fan was absolutely in seventh heaven that he could actually address Yitzhak Perlman. And he said to him, you know, you were just amazing tonight. You played so beautifully. He said, thank you. And the fan continued. He says, you know, my entire life, I always wanted to play the violin. I've met some of the greatest violin players that are alive today, but none of them has played like you've played tonight. I would give my life to play like you've played. And to this, Perlman answered, I have given my life. We can have values, but are we willing to give our life for it, or rather live our lives with it, to dedicate our lives for it, to consistently work on it, to be a Yitzhak Perlman? He has given his life in order to get to it. In Parshas Chayei Sarah, we learn about the life of Sarah. When it talks about her death, we learn about her life. And the first pasuk that it says there is that Sarah lived 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. And every child in elementary school asks, why does it repeat the 7 years, 20 years, 100 years? And Rashi, of course, comes to the rescue and explains that like she was at 7, she was at 20. Like she was at 20, she was at 100. Just like at 20, she was free from sin, from Beis Din Shalmala. So too at 100, she was free from sin. And just like she was 20, she had the beauty of a 7-year-old, the purity of a 7-year-old. And the pasuk continues and says, these were the days of Sarah. And Rashi again says, why is the need to repeat this? We already heard she lived 120 and 7 years. These were the years of Sarah, obviously. And Rashi again comes to the rescue and he says, all of her days, all of her years were completely, consistently, equally great. And the Rebbe asks on this, what does it mean all her years were consistently, equally great? Here we're talking about such an amazing woman. How a person is at 7 is hopefully not what they're like at 20. And hopefully not what they're like at 100. Hopefully we grow and develop and become different people, greater people. What does it mean that she was the same way? And the Rebbe tells us that at every stage of her life, she used that stage consistently, equally good. Meaning, of course, she wasn't at 7 what she was at 20, or 20 what she was at 100. But every stage was a step for the next stage. Every stage was equally good because it was consistently keeping in mind her goals, her aspirations, her inner core, who she was. You know, a bunch of years ago, my son, when he was about 11 or 12, decided he wanted to learn how to juggle balls. I knew nothing about it, but he learned how to juggle, and he actually got very good at it. And at one point I said to him, "What's the trick? What's the secret? How did you learn how to do it so well?" And he says, "Ma, there's 3 parts to it that you need to know. First part, you got to practice, and you got to keep on practicing. No one knows how to juggle without practicing. You got to keep at it. Practice. Second point he tells me, focus. You got to keep on watching those balls. Those balls keep on going, and you can't take your eyes off of them for even a minute, even a second. And the third point he said, you got to keep on moving. Those balls keep going quickly. Once they're up in the air, you got to keep on going." And that's how our life is too. Very much a juggling act. Practice, focus, and movement. Sarah's life wasn't exactly the same, but she had the focus, the practice, and the movement, that consistency to get her to the next stage. As women, we go through a lot of stages in our lives. We have stages when we're younger, we have stages when we're single, we have stages when we're married, we have stages when we have little children, we have stages when the nest empties, and almost at each stage, we're almost like recreating ourselves. And the point isn't just to be the same, and what is needed of us isn't the same at every stage. We're constantly looking for different directions to find that meaning in our lives. But those aspects of who we are, what our inner core is, needs to remain the same. And that's why it says about Avram and Sarah, Zekenim ba'im bayamim. They were old, they had many days, they came into their days. And again, the question is, obviously, if there's zakein ba'im bayamim, obviously, if you're old, you entered your days. How can you not enter your days if you're old? But the point is to teach us not just the amount of years that they lived, which zakein tells us. They were old, they had many, many years. But ba'im bayamim, they entered into every day. You know, so often we could be stuck at a light, we can be stuck in a line at the bank or the supermarket, we could be stuck in the waiting room of a doctor's office, and we're trying to pass those times. We're hoping for the times to go faster, to go quicker. You know, as little children, they'll often look ahead. The next vacation is when. And we do that too. We think about, when is it going to pass? When's the next thing going to come? When's this stage going to finally be over? And what Avram and Sarah are teaching us is kenim ba'im bayamim, to enter into every day. Sure, they had challenges. Sure, they had difficulties. Life wasn't a picnic. I mean, you go through their lives, you can see that. But every situation was entered into. Their days were entered into. It wasn't an amount of days, it was how they lived their days. As Javi mentioned, I come from Toronto, and the weather there in the winter could be very, very cold and very snowy. And when you learn to drive in the snow, you learn one very, very important lesson. One of the first things that the instructor will tell you is that when your car skids in the ice or snow, as inevitably it will, you need to do something that's totally, completely counterintuitive. Your first reaction when you're starting to skid and you're skidding into this lane where there might be an oncoming car, or you're skidding into this telephone pole, or who knows what, your first reaction is to jerk the wheel the other way, to move it exactly the opposite direction. And your instructor says, that's not correct. You need to turn the wheel in the direction of the skid. Only once you feel like you now have regained control of the car can you then turn it away from where you don't want to go, which is the pole or the other oncoming cars. In life, we often skid out of control. Anyone who's above the age of probably 5, knows that things don't go in life exactly how you want it to go. You skid out of your lane, you skid out of control. And the point is that in order to confront this struggle, this challenge, you need to go in that direction. You need to enter into your days. You need to understand what it is that you're confronting. You need to face your demons and your fears and your insecurities. If you're in a relationship, you need to understand, why did this person just say what they just said? Because my initial intuitive reaction is to close off from that insult, to run away from it. And you say, no, no, I want to confront it. I need to understand it. You skid in the direction, you turn into the direction of the skid in order to then gain control and to continue steering to where you want to go. That's what entering into our days means. That's what understanding it means. But you don't automatically, intuitively do that unless you have that learning, that background, that being in touch with the inner core of what you are. It's interesting, the Midrash says that Hashem said to Abraham and Sarah, "Va'agad l'shemecha," I will make your name very great. And the Midrash says that the way that Hashem decided to make their name great was during their lifetime, he had minted coins in their honor. And these coins that were minted in their honor had a very interesting shape on the front and the back. On the front, there was an old man and an old woman. And on the other side, there was a young man and a young woman, a boy and a girl. And this young boy and girl was Avram and Sarah, and this old woman and old man was Abraham and Sarah. The Eitz Yosef says that the reason why they had this young and the old was because Sarah became young when she had Yitzchak. And this new vitality, this new youthfulness remained with her forever, for all times. And the Rebbe explains this youthfulness remained with her because her body became like her soul. In other words, there was no conflict between her body and soul. And therefore, there was nothing that the body needed to do to age. It remained youthful just like the soul does. On a conceptual level, what this means is, you know, we look at, in Yiddishkeit, we look at an old person and we see them as a zakein. Zekana chachma. This person acquired wisdom. This is somebody who is a wise, mature individual. But there's also an advantage to youth. We look at youth and we see a curiosity, a wonder, an inquisitiveness, an ability to confront society and say, this is not right. A lack of cynicism. This was the power that Abraham and Sarah had. That they had at the one point this maturity of old age, this intellectual maturity, this emotional maturity, this ability to deal maturely with the world around them and themselves. But at the same time, they were able to retain that youthful enthusiasm, exuberance, idealism, and confrontation of what's wrong in society, to fight it. That mixture was something that they were able to maintain their entire lives, through youth, through old. And that's why the coin had both elements in it. There was a painter who was painting someone's house. And the owner of the house said, you know, when you're painting, there's mezuzahs on every doorpost, so please very carefully take them down and remember exactly where they were. And when you're finished painting, put them back up. And the house was quite a large house, and there was many, many mezuzahs on it. When the painter finally finished his job, he came to the owner and he said, you're going to be so happy with the work. The house looks gorgeous. And yes, I listened to you. I put back those mezuzahs on the doorpost, each and every single one of them. And I even did better for you. I took out the warranty that was inside them so that you don't have to worry about it. Of course, the warranty that was inside it is the mezuzah, the whole mezuzah, the parchment inside. So we can go through our lives sometimes with everything seems like it's in place. It's perfectly in the right place. The paint is freshly painted. But if we're missing that mezuzah, that parchment paper, we're missing it all. I went to speak once, and the shlucha's husband said, "Do you think it would be okay if my wife will speak to you? She has some issues and questions that she's dealing with." I said, "Of course." I sat down with the shlucha, and we had a heart-to-heart talk. And she said, "You know, Chana, I've been here on shluchas for many, many years. And when I came out, I was full of so much enthusiasm, so much idealism. And I just feel, as time goes on, I'm giving and giving and giving. And I don't feel it. I don't feel it anymore. I have questions, I have issues, things that are stupid things. They don't even really bother me, but they bother me. And I'm not sure what to do." So I said to her, "Tell me, do you learn? Do you study in your day-to-day?" And she says, "What do you mean, do I study? I'm constantly giving shiurim and this and that. Some of them are basic, some of them are more. I'm constantly teaching. I have to learn for it." I said, No. That's learning in order to give over. Do you learn anything for yourself? To quench your own inner soul, to quench your own neshama?" She says, "No, I never do." I said, "Maybe that's something that would fill you up, because we all are giving in our day-to-day lives in so many ways. And as women especially, we're constantly giving to the point that sometimes we could be empty. And the point of CyberSem, the point of this learning, the point of this inner core is, how do you maintain your consistency in life? How do you maintain your shevet, shifto? How do you maintain the exuberance, the wonder of learning, and the wonder of how you look at your society? How do you find that bow that reaches to your inner core to keep your inner core strong? And the only way is through constant learning. Last year, we went to visit my parents in Toronto, and we took a different route on the way back. We went through a gorgeous place that I'd never seen before. If you ever travel and you ever drive, I would really encourage you to see. It's called Watkins Glen Park. Any of you ever seen that? It's on the Finger Lakes by New York. It's called Watkins Glen Park, and it's about a 2-mile glen that we hiked through. But the glen has this gorge where there's water and waterfalls cascading down at almost every place that you pass by. And we hiked through it, and as we're hiking, we see that what happened is the force of this water falling, which was about 400 feet that it fell, created this torrent, so that at different places, it created all kinds of cascading waterfalls, staircases out of the ground, gorgeous, gorgeous scenery, all from the water simply falling down. The stones had immediately been carved, not immediately, had slowly been carved into all these gorgeous, gorgeous shapes. And as we were going through it, Shira, you were there, we snapped a million pictures, and we also immediately thought about Rabbi Akiva, and how, as a young shepherd, he saw the water falling onto the stone, and he wondered, a 40-year-old shepherd, can this water that is making a hole through the stone, can it come through and make a hole? Can Torah make a hole in my stony heart? Of course, we know we're celebrating Lag BaOmer with Rabbi Akiva, and we know thousands and thousands of students later, he would often tell his own students the power of a drop of water, and how the dripping drop of water can completely transform a heart made of stone, into a real vibrant heart. So often we go through our lives and there's, we come through and we hear a speech that makes us feel, I'm going to really try harder now. Or we go through a yontif that makes us feel so inspired. And then we reach back into the mundanity of life and paying the bills and doing the 1,000,001 to-do list that's on our list. And we forget our inspiration. And at those moments, we need to remember the little drip drop. All it takes is a drip drop, but a consistent drip drop, 127. This consistent drip drop at different stages differently, but entering into our days to make a real difference in our lives. Before this talk, about a week ago, I went for lunch with a group of my friends. It was actually coffee. And I told them I have this talk on lifelong learning. I said, how would you approach it? What comes to mind when you think of lifelong learning? These are friends from Lakewood. And one is a mechaneches. Another one is a very smart lady with children and grandchildren. And the first one says, well, every day we say Birkas Torah. So it means that we must be obligated every day to learn. I said, that's true. We are obligated every day to learn. Not only are we obligated every day to learn, but the Rebbe says, in fact, that if a man would know as much as a woman is obligated to know, he would be a huge Talmid Chacham. So right away there was a, huh? What? But I explained, of course we have to know the whole body of halachos, because that's everything that we do. And in addition to that, we have to know everything about Avas Hashem, Yiras Hashem, which is the whole body of Chassidus and the whole body of Hashkafa, and learning and understanding that. This is our obligation. The second friend then said that when she thinks of lifelong learning, she brought an example how she had just asked a Rebbitzin to give a shiur in her house. And the Rebbitzin told her, she's not into giving shiurim that are just for the sake of intellectual exploration. But she'd be willing to do that because nowadays, if it keeps women away from the malls, that too is positive. And I said, okay, that's an interesting perspective. And it's true. Torah keeps us away from all kinds of negative things. But of course, we know that the Rebbe taught us how to look at this world as Basi Lagani, as a garden, as Hashem's garden, and how it's a beautiful world. True, it has thorns in it, and of course it has those difficulties and struggles and things that we have to avoid, but it could be a beautiful garden that each of us can cultivate and transform and create into the greatest beauty, because each of us have that inner core that we can make this beauty. But in order to make that beauty, we need to find that inner core through learning, through continual learning. We need to find that bow that touches our very heart, our very core. We need to keep that consistency of the juggler, of the 100, the 20, the 7, entering into each and every one of our days. Because you don't just become a Yitzchak Perlman overnight. It takes the work. But we don't need to be discouraged, because all it takes is the drip drop. The slow, steady drip, drop, drop. To become the beautiful garden that we all can become. Now in Israel, it's customary for generals to say things very different than they say in the rest of the world. In the rest of the world, when it comes to the armies, the generals will say, "Onward, soldier," or "Soldier, march." In Israel, on the other hand, the generals will say, "Follow me," as they go ahead. It's all about setting the example. We all want this beautiful, meaningful life. We want it for ourselves, for our children, for our world. But in order to do so, we need to be setting the example for ourselves and for those around us. And I just want to end with a short story, if I may. Do I still have a little time? A short story on the power of learning. About a year ago, I went to speak in Riverdale for Sarah Shem Tov, if any of you know her. And, okay. Oh, look at that. So you'll like the story. Look at what Hashgacha Pratis. So she's an amazing shlucha, and she has a beautiful, beautiful community. And she invited me to speak. It was in the house of a woman in her community, beautiful house. And I spoke. And after the speech, she approached me with a young girl. And she said, I want you to hear this story. This was a young girl from upstate New York. And about 7 years before that, Sarah had traveled to Eretz Yisrael. The reason why she went to Eretz Yisrael was because she had a simcha, a wedding, of the woman in the house who she made this event. It was one of her children that was actually getting married. So she went to Eretz Yisrael for this simcha. On the way back, she's flying on the plane back. She gets all comfortable in her seat, and she's feeling, finally. You know, as a shlucha, she has an incredibly busy life, constantly giving, constantly doing. And she's like, finally, 10, 12 hours, just complete quiet, relaxing. But Sarah doesn't just relax. Instead, she took out something to read. She took out a book that I had written. It's called Tending the Garden, if any of you have seen it. And it's a pretty heavy book full of lots of sources she wanted to learn. And she was all excited that for the next 10, 12 hours, she could finally relax before she gets back to the kids and her shlichus and everything else and learn something for herself. As she's opening the book to start, sits down next to her another young woman. The woman was from upstate New York. And the woman had just come back from a birthright trip. And something was ignited inside of her. She was inspired. And Sarah starts talking to her, and she could see that the woman was really inspired, but she had questions. For the next 10 hours, 12 hours on the plane, Sarah was busy talking to this young girl about her issues, her questions, and obviously she left very much different than what she had come. As they're landing in LaGuardia, JFK, Sarah says, you know, it was so nice to speak to you for those last many hours. I only feel it's appropriate to gift you this book. And she gives her the book that she had intended to read in order for her to read it. And she signs it in the front. She signs her name. She makes a little something there and signs it for her and gives it to her. And that was the end. Fast forward 7 years. It's Rosh Hashanah. And Sarah's doing what she does every Rosh Hashanah. She's greeting everyone who's coming to her shul and saying hello to everybody. And she sees a lot of new faces. And she sees the face of one young individual, this young girl, who looks very familiar to her, but she can't place her. And the girl looks at Sarah, and she sees somebody who seems so familiar, but she can't place her. It was only later when this young girl goes back home. She was dating actually someone who lived in Riverdale, who was in school. He was a medical student. And when this young girl goes back to where she was, back to her home in upstate New York, she was able to actually see, Sarah Shem Tov, I thought that was her, and make the connection. This was the woman who she had met 7 years before on her journey. That couple is now married and living in Riverdale as active members of their Chabad house. The point is a little bit of learning, the drip drop of learning, and inspiration, of course, but that drip drop of learning, we never know to where it could lead us, because it touches the very infinite power that we each have, that garden of Hashem that we can each grow. And let us use this opportunity of CyberSem to grow that flower, to grow that garden, to grow ourselves, to fight our demons and fears and insecurities by having that and finding that inner core.